snapping our fingers in 3, 2, 1. I'm Uri Lifshitz. What's up? My name is Uri, Eran. What is yours? No, it's useful and important to have adequate names for NPCs because they are a great part of the introduction and characterization of that NPCs. Um, in many ways, a name is usually one of the first things you know about the character other than external appearances, which is, a big deal, at least for me. I believe in names. I think names are one of those things that define if the player character will be interested in something, whether it's an NPC, a location, a quest. It's a great way to attract attention or to diffuse that. Oh, that mysterious fellow by the bar? That's John. The casual mentioning of the name and not adding anything to it is an automatic giveaway that it's someone well known who's not really important for this game. Pam pam pam. Indeed, and one of the big problems of most GMs when it comes to this field is okay, there's an NPC, and now the characters have suddenly decide. One of the big problems that GMs across the world encounter is okay, so the players have decided to silently go one by one and ask every patron in the tavern, how are they called? Where are they from? What's up? Etc. And the time that you have for making up these names is non existing. So it's hard. It's really hard. Like, now, one of my favorite ways of inventing a name for my characters is simply to use other languages. How do I do that? I try to think of one or two main aspects which define my new character or that I want them to define my new character. That already give me a lot to work with because I make a list of things which are important or defining for that character. Then I take these words and I translate them to a foreign language just to see what's fun to say, what's rolling off the tongue. And then I just take two of these words, use one of them as, wow, איך אומרים שם פרטי? Given name. Use one of those as my character's given name and the other word as a surname. I've done this for my current character, Krieger van Messer. um, which Krieger I think is honor and Messer is knife or something like that, because he's a very honorable fighty type. I also have like German because I already have fixed languages. I use German for martial types, Italian for spellcasters, and French for bards. That's awesome. I love this system because it's not just the translation part. It makes you think about what word do you want to translate, and that means what word would define my new character, and that gives you something. It's very grounding. Fountain is also it's a word. It's a very strong association for a character, for the character of that character. Yes, and of course you don't have to go with the language. You can go in other similar direction. A simple um, لا أنا أجد أخا. And of course you can expand on that not just in language but in other ways. My previous character, Bester Everskill, was a bard, and so I named all the NPCs around him, all his immediate family, in names relating to music. His sister was Melodia, his mother was Harmony, his father was Staten from Static, and so forth. It gives you a whole family of concepts to use and hash out other names which are related to your character. Actually, it works the other way around because the party I joined as best level skill was very well balanced and rounded, and they had pretty much everything they need in a fight. I said, fine, then I will take over all the skills section. So it came from a mechanical perspective that I said, okay, I'm gonna create a character which is gonna be the best at all the skills. Hence the name Bester Every Skill, which later got shortened to Bester Every Skill. Something like that, yeah. I take a lot of advices from books, and David Eddings, in one of his Belgrade or Melorian books, and there's a scene in which a wizard tells someone, build a city here and name it thus. And I don't remember the name of the city, but the character replied to the wizard that that's not a name of a city. It's weird. And the wizard simply told him, a name of a city is the name you give it. People get used to it. Something along those lines. Uh, exactly. There's all. indeed. רגע, רגע. איך קוראים לזה? Nine Fingers, איך קוראים לספר? Book Fantasy, Nine Fingers, Logan. Logan Nine Fingers, First Law. The First Law. Okay. There's also a whole section dealing with nicknames and how to use them. I discovered this really, really well in The First Law. רגע, שאני לא זוכר אם זה ספר או שזה השם של הטרילוגיה. כרגע... There's also a book series named The First Law. The first book is titled The Blade Itself, and they have the Barbarian of the North have various nicknames for everyone. There's Logan Nine Fingers, which is thus called because he's missing one of his fingers, and you have another character which is named Weakest because he's the weakest among the party. And I just found the idea of forget the name. Everyone call everyone else by their nickname or by the name that they earn at some point. And that's also a very fun way to play around with naming characters. I would also say that one of the best ways to take a name and make it pop out or be more or feel more connected to the story and the setting is to use honorific or addendums to the name. For example, if you add any honorific to a name, Lord, Count, or my personal favorite, Vicomte, or it comes from French, and then pretty much English took it as is and decided, this is my word now. But it doesn't matter. Add any honorific, any prefix to a name which has a meaning, and immediately it becomes a name. His Lordship Tulip. You don't think about Tulip the flower. You think about his Lordship because that's the name. The Dutch Van is something I like to use a lot. My current character, like we mentioned before, Krieger van Messer. Van is an indication of nobility. And if you don't want the foreign touch, you can always use off. If you remember, Bester Everskill usually presents himself as, hello, I am Bester Everskill off the Magnimar Everskills. It gives you an immediate sense of this character is from somewhere, and it has a lineage, it has a history. It's not a standalone something, just a random name in the void. It is very much ingrained in the setting. which is a great name. There's an urban there's an urban myth about why R2D2 and C3PO are called that way, and I can't remember where I heard this, and I don't know if it's true, but that these were the names of radio stations that whoever named those characters heard while driving to the set and said, "Oh, these are names that roll off the tongue. They're fun to say." And I think that's one of the things that's very important for me. If there's an important NPC which I want the characters to interact with, it's very important it would be an easy name to say, fun to say even. It's one of those really small things that can really influence a lot about your relationship to a character. And remembering the name of an NPC is not as easy as it sounds, especially if there's a lot of them. Let's talk a bit more about NPCs because we have mentioned because we talked a lot about PCs and their names, and a lot of times not just GM but also players would need to think about, okay, how do I name the parents of my character? How do I create a backstory? What's the name of the valet who parked the car of my amazingly James Bond style super spy Jenny? Similarity? That's exactly what I'm doing. I use family of languages in order to create a similar feel from people from similar groups. In my current Fate campaign, for example, all the fairies from the summer court have names in French, which has something to do with spring or flowers. For example, Flora is the name of one of those. And all fairies from the winter court have names in Italian that have something to do with cold. Lord Escarce, Mr. Yellow, Lady Frio, etc. Um, I use this scheme because it capitulates on what you said regarding different names from different ethnicities or countries, and I import that into my world, thus using the same feel for the group. Just call me Lemonhead. Yeah, it's the elf. Yeah, but what is she called? You know, the elf. Or maybe her real name just have, 24 syllables and she doesn't have the time. Or because, you know, she let people know her name, but then every 40 years she has to teach everyone again. And that's like, who has the time? Mm. Okay. Okay. You can see that also very nicely done in some books, like Moby Dick, for example. The first line is "Call me Ishmael, because in my youth, blah 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 blah," and that's definitely not the character's real name. It starts with "Call me Ishmael because blah blah blah." There's a reason why people call him Ishmael. It never actually said what his real name is. Uh, okay. Mhm. Now we've mentioned a lot of tips here, and it's sometimes very difficult to keep everything organized. So I would suggest the easiest way to do that is simply to not do it on the spot. Have a list ready of names who fits different groups. That's an excellent way to make sure that you're not getting stuck mid-session, needing to give a name to a character and not having one ready and doesn't want to break the naming scheme. I have a list of names for characters from the summer court, from the winter court, from this area of the map, that area of the map. You can also use random generators. A lot of them comes predisposed with dwarven name, elven name, foreign names, gypsy names, whatever. So it's a lot easier nowadays to prepare in advance or to cheat with some technological assistance. Yeah, he's not just a great farmer. He's outstanding in his field. Okay, should we move on to location and organization? A good name is very evocative of an image of some sort, be it yeah, be it either a physical image or the essence of that place. Pleasantville is a great name because it automatically gives you some sense of what is it you're walking into. Alive with the sound of music. Yeah, because there's a lot of hills around, and you need to distinguish those from any other hills. Because everyone know which hills you're talking about when you say the hills. Okay. Again, I would suggest, in order to make any location feel more like a real location, to use prefix or suffix to that effect. Let's say you really want to name your city or town or next location of adventure Rhubarb, after the famous plant. But Rhubarb would not sound like an actual town. Why not make it a bit more integral as a name of a town if it's Fort Rhubarb, if it has a fort in it? If not, it could be Robarb-dale, as dale is a suffix usually used for towns, or Rhubarb or Robarb-vile, which again, a very common suffix for a town. And we can go on and on. Port Rhubarb, the city of Rhubarb, Rhubarb's castle, Rhubarb's crossing, etc., etc., etc. And immediately when you hear these names, you're saying, okay, that is a town built around the castle, next to a landmark, is a port town, etc., etc. It both gives the immediate sense of a location and gives you some more basic information about that location. When I created an entirely fictional setting, I simply decided, okay, I have fort town and I have port towns and I have, big cities. And I simply decided on a specific prefix for every kind of town, and that's it. Immediately you can see a pattern, and the minute the characters are approaching a new location, the players know what to expect. Okay, this would probably be a small fort town just based on the name. Lastly, hmm, I think changing a name is one of the strongest moves you can do, either as a GM or as a player. And I want to give two examples of that. In the anime series Lelouch of the Rebellion, also known as Code Geass, the Japan is being conquered and renamed Area 11, which is such a great characterization for the occupying force. I mean, okay, there's 10 other section which has been conquered, and this is just another one for those. It gives the whole sense of this place no longer matter. We want to erase the individuality of a specific location, etc., etc. So doing the same, imagine your party going back to a city they visited, and last time it was called Fort Rhubarb, and now it is called Justintown. And imagine their surprise. What? This isn't Fort Rhubarb? We've just been here like 2 months ago. No, now Justin's in charge, and now this is Justintown. This is a big change. Another example. Sorry, you go. No, if you have another example, give it before I go on to think about. Now, in my current game, one of the players, my beautiful, smart, amazing spouse, is playing a human. I'm sorry, was playing a human doctor named Lee Greer. Greer is French for healing or whatever. I'm not sure, uh, and that's how she picked the name. And over the course of the campaign, that character became closer and closer to the summer court until she was offered to join the court and become a fairy. Technically, become a changeling and then become a fairy, but we fast forward that, and she changed her character's definition from a human doctor to a summer court fairy. And she obviously changed her name to fit that. She dropped the grill, which has a strong connotation to what she did as a human, and renamed herself Fleur de Lis, which as a name has a lot of connotation of nobility, but also again fitting with the naming scheme of all the names in the summer court have something to do with French. it's not a good one. Has something. All the names of the summer court have something to do with French and flora and growth. So I found that amazing because doing this sort of change, like stripping away or changing your character, is a beautiful development, especially if you do stuff like we, especially if you move away from the stuff we mentioned beforehand. Instead of Lord Rhubarb, you now just tell people to call you Rhubarb and to drop the Lord. That's a big change for a character. לא, אבל אני רוצה שנסיים את זה ככה יותר יפה. אמ, אתה יודע, אני מרגיש ש-taking the load off זה כאילו אחרי הכתוביות, אז צריך שיהיה סגירה יפה של הפרק. Well, that's all the tips we have today for talking about names and naming names and transitioning names and making names count in your game. If you have others, please email us at show@dwarfcast.net. Find us on the Twitters and the Facebooks and, and the emails, etc. We would love to hear about different naming schemes that you have or your characters have or your campaign world have. I never get enough of those. It's amazing the crazy ideas that people get for naming schemes. Well, the past week I've been busy. I've played a lot, which was fun. I concluded the current adventure in my unrelated incidents campaign. I've mentioned it last week when the party was helping a specific knight track down a runaway vampire, and then, ta-da-dam, a lot of other factions decided that they want to help, and they're also chasing this vampire. And at the end, they discover that the knight and vampire are actually in love. Big surprise, big twist, and now they need to help that knight who is protecting this vampire who was falsely accused of a crime she didn't commit, um, to somehow smuggle her out of town. But currently, everyone are chasing her because of them. And it was a beautiful, beautiful conclusion to this lover's tragedy of sort. I really like that. It was a great conclusion. You know, when you get a good ending in a way that you couldn't really predict or plan for, and the plan comes together, and the players are really happy because they made something ingenious, and you're really happy because whatever it is you tried to convey using the medium of roleplay really got through. So it was loads of fun, just loads of fun. Um, But I wanted to talk about something specific that happened during this tiny adventures, and that's something I've been doing a lot lately, and that taking improv games a lot of the games and then taking improv games and finding ways to integrate them into the gaming session. Now, there's plenty of improv games. I'm guessing most of our listeners might recognize them from shows such as Whose Line Is It Anyway? And are now asking themselves, how do you do that? How do you take a game from TV and put that inside a gaming session? So, for example, my player characters have met a Rakshasa. It was a very polite Rakshasa, and everything was going well. And I have decided that Rakshasa rolled their R's. For example, this specific Rakshasa, his name was Mortal, but he rolled his R, so he should be properly pronounced as Mortal. However, you roll your R's as long as it's, let me rephrase that. However, the length in which you roll your R has to be a sign of respect. So if you talk to a noble Rakshasa, you might call him Mortal, or a similar Rakshasa, Roger, you just call Roger, shorter R's. So as a GM, I had to change the way I speak and change the length of rolling the R's in my sentences to each one of the characters because they were in different levels of nobility. And when the character would speak to that Rakshasa or to his bodyguard, they would need to roll their R's. However, in the beginning of that encounter, the Rakshasa didn't know what the level of honor he should show to some of the party because he didn't know what their title is. So I had to speak for minutes on end in a conversation where he simply tried to not use any words containing the letter R. Now, this is a very common improv game. You simply get some sort of איך אומרים, קושי או, you simply get a constraint of some sort and you're not allowed to use that. For example, you're not allowed to use words with a specific letter, or you're not allowed to talk with a specific accent, or you can only speak with sentences of 3 or 4 or 5 words in them. And I always try to find some ways of taking these games and putting them inside my gaming session. I think it's a fun challenge for everyone around. Yeah, and yeah, okay. Yes, thank you. It was. אין לי שום דבר חשוב, חם באמת שקרה, פשוט זה היה ממש כיף. Bring cookies, bring beer. Really, really exciting news, Alan. Best of luck. Cool. So, רוצה להגיד בכיף, אבל לא זכרתי איך אומרים את זה. With pleasure. So everyone, להתראות!